Okay, so here we are again. So she laughs maniacally. So we're on session 8 of the Northern Digital Storytelling Festival 2023. It's been a fantastic week. I was just saying to these guys earlier, my head is full like a sponge of some really amazing information and talks and ideas and insights, which we've kind of been gleaning from people over the last week. So it's been really excellent so far, and I'm excited about tonight. We've got some amazing speakers and panelists tonight joining us as well. We've got Wayne Sables, Dominic, Powlesland, and Bethany Watrous. Is it Watrous or Watrous?
Watrous.
Watrous. Yeah. I won't get that right. So lovely, thank you. And Maggie here, my co-host and partner in crime if the internet breaks, who will take over as well. So welcome to everyone, welcome to our attendees. I'm going to do a quick intro in terms of the format. Robbie, you'll be sick of hearing this, I'm sorry, but just for everyone else. My name's Heather Niven, my colleague's Maggie Hornby, and we are your hosts for the session tonight. The festival's been in the planning since before Christmas, so we're really delighted to be bringing 58 speaker sessions over a 10-day period online to watch live, and also we're recording the sessions, so you can go to northerndigifest.co.uk and check out those recordings anytime if you want to hear them again, or if you haven't heard some of them, if you missed any of the sessions. They're all free to attend, accessible to all. I've even remembered my captions so that the subtitles on the YouTube videos, although some of the text is a bit ropey. I might have to go back and correct some of it at some point in the future. But never mind, we'll move swiftly on. We've created a program for people at the top of their game, you know, real sort of bleeding edge creatives and scientists and academics for your viewing pleasure. So the format is as follows. We have 3 talks tonight, 3 15-minute talks. We will introduce each speaker, have a talk, and then at the end of that, we'll have a Q&A session. So for any attendees, if you've got questions that you can think of as we go through, the Q&A section is at the bottom, the button is at the bottom. Feel free to add your questions in, and we'll curate a Q&A panel discussion at the end. So before we get started, I'd really like to say a big thank you to the Screen Industries Growth Network, who's sponsoring the event. And without them, we'd all be on beans on toast. So thanks very much to you guys again for sponsoring the festival. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to run it. So just imagine you're having a cup of tea and a bun in the living room with your mates. That's how relaxed the vibe we want for this evening. We're creating a relaxing and supporting environment for new learning and conversations. Okay, so that's me. So I'm going to introduce you now, Wayne, who's up first. Wayne Sables has over 19 years experience working with a wide range of businesses, councils, community groups and educational centres. He loves producing, designing, developing and delivering high quality, high scale, large scale even multi-art projects, and creating films that tell his partners and clients' stories. Working with both the creative and commercial industries has given him unique insight into how the two can work together to create projects that have mass engagement and increase a company's reach. His talk will explore the art of creating digital stories without narration. How do you effectively use visual and audio elements to convey a compelling story, and how to engage your audience through creative use of images, music and sound effects? How do you create a space where the audience can reflect, contemplate and settle into a work that allows them to be immersed within their own comfort zone? Over to you, Wayne.
Fabulous, thank you very much. So before I jump into my presentation, I've put a thing in the chat, which is a link to 2 of the short videos.
Okay.
I'm going to be playing later, because I have a funny feeling that the internet is not going to be my friend today. So
okay.
They're only a minute long each,
and
they're just highlighting videos. But I thought I'll pop them in there first.
No problem.
So yeah, so I think just a little bit of context about me, really. So I come from digital technologies, from a very traditional. Non-traditional background. So I originally trained as a dancer. So I had a 10-year career as a contemporary and ballet dancer. So I think for me, it's I always kind of see stories in terms of movement. And I think coming from that background is what really led me and really informs me in my digital practice. So I just wanted to kind of preference kind of the stuff that I'm going to talk about with that kind of tidbit, really, because usually when I do these things, I get to the end and people go, but what's that dancey bit that you did before? Because that feels like it might be important to this bit that you're doing now. So I come from a physical discipline. So I used to tell stories with my body, and on the odd occasion with my face, which, let's be honest, nobody needs to see that, and that is a critic's review, not my review.
Well, don't worry.
Yeah, so
if the video doesn't play, we'll just get you to do a wee dance. It'll be fine.
Well, I am, as my children like to tell me, I'm the world's best dad dancer. But I'm currently banned from dancing at the minute. They've put me on a ban, so I'll have to get permission from the gatekeepers.
Okay,
right, I'm going to share my screen. He says, so let me just open my presentation. So of course it doesn't want to let me share my screen. It's not showing my presentation. You know, oh, here we go. Fabulous. It just needed to reload. Okay. Can you guys see that? Fabulous. Okay, so let me just move you because you're right in my words. So making a digital story without narration is something I am going to be talking about. Okay, so firstly, I think for me, every time I make a piece of work, so whether that be film projection, whether it be dance film, whether it be kind of VR-based work, or whether it be using any kind of digital technology, I always remind myself of what narrative is, because I think the misnomer for me is that when you're making kind of immersive experiences that are around kind of not using traditional narration, a lot of people think that there is no storyline on, there is no narration. And actually, usually there's a really solid foundation for the kind of work that I'm particularly making. So I always kind of like to read this and just remind myself of what actually telling stories is, really. And I'm not going to read it, you know, because you guys can read and you can pause it and you can do all those things. But I think the most important thing for me, really, kind of narrative structures within film. So because my background is in physical forms, so you know, when I retired as a dancer, I retrained as a filmmaker. So I come from kind of physical and then traditional filmmaking. So that's, you know, being on set, that's using lighting, working kind of in a very linear fashion. So when I try and tell stories, because, you know, we're always trying to develop what we do. For me, it's a constant learning journey. So I try and use these structures within my work, really. So I might work in a chronological or linear structure in terms of my projection mapping, but I might not convey that to my audience. It might not be really obvious, but I'll use that, or I might look at a circular narrative and take that approach visually. So it might not be a traditional narration, or it might not be like a story arc with a beginning, middle, and end in a traditional sense, but I might use a circular narrative visually. So I might start with a set visual, and I might finish with that set visual, which indicates that the piece has kind of rounded itself off. And usually with the, I think it's very important to say, usually with the kind of stuff that I make, it's usually durational in a sense. So, you know, like we have if we're making a film, you know, we have a set time limit, and our audience absolutely know the rules of that film because they can see it digitally. So you know, if you go to the cinema, unless it's, you know, something epic like Avatar, you know, you go and you know that you're going to be there for a couple of hours, more or less. So you can structure your evening or your calendar around that. Where the stuff that I make, it might be on for 6 hours, but it might be the same piece 20 times, depending on the duration. So one of the challenges that we have is, how do you communicate this visual narrative, this visual language with an audience? And then how do you communicate how it starts and finishes? Because sometimes, you know, you might be at a festival and there's people coming and going, and you can't physically run around all the audiences and go, 5 minutes, it starts in 5, you're halfway through, stop there, you're halfway. So really, we need to find structures and mechanisms for us to create stories and create spaces and places where people can dip in, still have a really quality experience, and not have that kind of that weird feeling of when you're the last person in the cinema and they turn the light on and they walk you in, and you kind of almost do the walk of shame. So with outdoor kind of performance-based work, you know, one of the constant challenges, and this is why I always use this, is that how do you then create a narrative structure that can be dipped into at any point within that. So then moving on from that, and all these visuals are my visuals, by the way, so they're all pieces that I've worked on. So this is the newest piece that we've recently got funding for, which is called, very, very clever, this title, I must admit, it's called The Glass House. And I'll let you guess as to why that is. There's no deep meaning. It is literally a glass house. So this piece really is, it's the piece that looks at durational work, it looks at space and place, and it looks at environment. And when I did, so I should say that we're literally at the start of this build. So this is from an R&D. It looks completely different to this now. And we literally start building it next week, ready for this winter. So all of this stuff that I'm going to talk about is literally terrifying me right now, and it's in my head, and it's all the stuff that I'm having to refigure. So the first thing, so how do we engage an audience without a traditional narrative, really? So if we just jump into film a minute, film's super easy when in comparison to this. And I know I'm going to get told off by filmmakers. I don't mean film is easy at all. It's not easy. But when you know, if these two were in like a charity football match, like projection and light installation would like get 20-0 and football would like get nothing, because they're very different games in terms of the way we think about them. So for me, the first thing I think about is kind of which genre am I working in? So is it a documentary form, or is it, you know, an abstract story? And then how do we marry a visual element to that and a digital element? So the glass house is a good example. It's a physical structure. So it's an art installation in its own right. So you can come and see it. You can engage with it in any way you want to engage with it, in any way that's right for you. So there's no underlying narrative. You can just rock up. It's there. It appears. You can leave in 5 minutes, or you can stay for 2 hours. But then for me, then there needs to be a deeper level of engagement within that. So that brings me on to the next bit. So what's the medium of this? So we have the genre we're working with, it's physical public sculpture. So what's the medium? Is that enough? Is it enough for it to be a piece of artwork in its own right, or does it need more? And I, for my sins, and it felt like a really good idea when I wrote the funding bid, felt like it needed more. Felt like it needed another layer of engagement within that. So we've got the layer one. It's a bit like Inception, but in public. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to the director of Inception in any way at all. But in terms of kind of to think about it, that there's sub layers within that people can engage with, and so you can go to layer one, and that's absolutely perfect if that's where you're comfortable, or you can go a bit deeper. So for me, it was about what's the medium, and then we decided with this that we were going to combine physical form and then digital LED lights, and we were going to program those LED lights so they would sit inside of this. So this is just some modeling that we did. I mean, this is about I guess maybe 200 centimeters long. The actual physical structure is 6 foot long, so it's substantially bigger, which poses a lot more challenges. But we decided we were going to use some LED lights because we wanted another layer to that. And then because I got super excited, we decided that we were going to add a third layer to that, because, you know, 2 layers is not enough, is it? You know, people want more. So we decided that we were going to use what we do, so film, projection, and light. And we're going to add a third element, which is we're going to use space and place within this. So we're trying to build up a visual language within that. So what will happen is that the elements will interact. So it has physical form, a structure. It has light inside of it. So it has an LED light component. And then it has sound, which we'll do. So it has a whole sound score. So the challenge is, how do we make those 3 things have a conversation? The only way to do that is to create a narrative between the 3 of them. Now, the narrative we will create, we won't tell a public audience, but it's really about cementing those art forms together. So making sure that those art forms can work together in a sense that the music can talk to the LEDs, and the LEDs kind of are very kind of complementary to the structure. Because what we don't want with this, and this is always a balancing act for me when I make work, is I don't want one to kind of overpower the other one. So it's about how do they work in harmony. So that's kind of the third layer, is mixing that. And I know what you're thinking, whoa, that's enough layers. Well, we thought so until we got into it. And then we decided that there's another layer to it, that actually, what if, rather than if we pre-program this, what if this was interactive? So what if this actually reprogrammed itself every night? So based on the place and space it's in. So we're looking at how can we use historical weather data for the venues we're in. So how can we connect it to Internet of Things, and how can it pull that data in real time? And then how can that then in real time program the sound, which will be made of different beds? And then how can the lights be reactive to the sound, all within this glass container? So we're really looking at what is that visual language, and how can that work within that? So it sounds really complex, and I think from a technical level it is, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it look really simple. So we go complex so we can strip it all back and then go really simple. So all of this stuff that is really about creating a visual language. So what are people going to see? How does it communicate? What are we saying? And then that neatly leads me onto things to consider. So when you're making any kind of work that it doesn't have a traditional narrative to it, so it doesn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end in a traditional sense. It might not necessarily have a voice or narration as well to kind of pull it all together. So some of the things I think that really, so what, as I think we're discovering, you need to put parameters in place, or people like me go super complex really quickly and add 35 levels of interactivity, when actually sometimes it only needs one, or it only needs two. So for me, I always think about, well, where is it going to go? So what's the space and the place that it's going to be? So is it in a traditional theatre, in which case there's a very set rules of how our audience engage within that? Or is it in a festival? So is it in a light festival, for example? So again, there's a very set parameters of how people are going to engage with that. So they know they're coming to a specific event that will have a level of expectation. Or is it as like this is going to do a mixture of those things, or is it that you can just stumble upon it? So it might be a standalone event, or you might be walking. I have this idea with this, that you'll be walking in Derbyshire, and all of a sudden you'll walk over the brow of the hill, and there'll be this really weird glass house stuck on the top of the hill. So then you have to think about like context and place and space and all those things, and how it interacts with that. And then the other thing to think about is, who's it for? So is it made with somebody? So is it made with the community, or is it made with a group of artists, or is it made on your own? And who is it for? And again, all of the kind of, and I don't always get these answers right, if I'm honest. And sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do, really, in that sense. But I always try and think about, well, who are my audience? Who is it for? And then I can start building those things. So, there's no point me having a level of interactivity that involves one person with a remote controlling the lights, or one person having an app on their phone and they can program it live, if there's going to be 1,000 people in the audience, because we're just going to break the matrix. So what is, like, how are we going to make it work within that? And then the other thing to consider is, like, what is the aim of it? So what's the aim of the work? Like, I want to come up with some really clever, insightful answer for the glass house. In all honesty, it came out of lockdown for me, and it came out of two things that I really missed. So I really missed being outside like we all did. And I really missed engaging with something that was just really beautiful, but I didn't have to think about. So that I had the option to think about. So I could stay and I could ask questions and I could interact with it, or I could just stumble upon it and go, yeah, it's really nice, really beautiful. I'm just going to go on my way now. So there's no deep level to it. I just really needed to have something that didn't require me to think too much. Obviously, I've absolutely broken that rule by developing it, because that's all I think about. And then one of the things, like on a bigger level for me, I really love creating spaces for people to be immersed. And I know we use the word immersed a lot at the minute, with everything that in terms of like VR and AR. And I'm really lucky that I get to work across the spectrum. But for me, immersions is about a feeling. So, it's about how you're immersed in that space and place at that current time for me. And then I also kind of think about, well, what is the story I'm telling? So is it like, is it just a story that it's really beautiful and it's really simple, and actually it's got a really beautiful light combination, and if you see it tonight in Edinburgh, it's going to look and feel like this, and then if you see it next week in Barnsley, it's the same thing, but it's going to feel slightly differently because it's interacting with its space. So the story for me, very simply, is it's about location, space, and place within that. And then the other thing that I try and think about, especially with outdoor work, and I think it's fair to say that what I try and do is I try and combine film projection into one. So I do a lot of projecting films on buildings really simply, but then part of the glass houses will project a film on it, but it won't look a film because it'll distort and all those kind of things. So really, I'm interested in how do we animate spaces in a really non-destructive way. So for this, I have an idea that when we project on it, it'll turn it into a kaleidoscope. So actually, we'll animate buildings with light, so that we can then get people the opportunity to engage in their surroundings in maybe in a different way, really. So then for me, my process is I always work backwards. So I always kind of try and think about what is the experience I want the audience to have. Whereas with a film, I always work from the beginning. So I write the script, or I get the concept, or I get the treatment, and then we build it that way. With outdoor work, I always think, well, okay, let's put myself in that space. So what do I want the audience to get? And they might not get what I want them, but it gives me a focus. How do I want it to look and feel? So I'm really emotionally driven. That probably comes from being a dancer. That for 10 years, my entire career was about conveying emotion on stage. So for me, it's really about like that really visceral thing. Like I always had this thing when I was dancing that like your audience will remember how you made them feel. They won't remember what you did at 33 minutes. Nobody's coming out of the theatre and going, did you see that really beautiful jump at 33 minutes? No, people are going out going, God, I was on the edge of my seat. That really made me feel something. So I try and work from that base. And then what I try and do is I try and visualize what it looks like. And I've put that it's okay for out, that's a typo, for it to change, it should be. And it often does. So I'll kind of envisage what it is, and just by the creative process, it will probably look completely different to what I first thought it was. So the glass house is a good example of that. It looked completely different to where it is. And then my next slide, and I know it's not going to play. So this is called Arca, and it's in that it's in the chat. So this is an outdoor piece that I actually was involved in the filming of it, but this had a really, really strong narrative to it, but they didn't tell anybody about it. So, and what was really interesting for me, and this piece wasn't my piece at all, but this piece was a piece that really got me thinking about how do we engage with outdoor spaces. And caveat to this, I'm not intending to involve fire in my work. This has fire in it. But I'll press play, and if it plays, great. If not, just click the link and we'll all look at the screen and pretend that it's playing at the same time. So I'm going to click go now. And of course, it's going to Wheel of Death. Let's just come off that one because I don't want any more of my videos played. So that for me was a real, like, I guess, when you see something and you can't stop thinking about it, that piece was the start of a journey for me. So that really was part of my transition from film into creating digital public art work. Although none of that's digital, it just kind of really made me, so where that was is a public square that I walk across every other day. So it's part of my route to my office, and I walk across it all the time. Never ever looked at it really, other than to avoid the rubbish or to avoid the fountains that are turned on. And I suddenly started seeing this space as a canvas in a different place. I mean, that had everything. It had a big giant boat. It had performers, so physical thing. It had a physical thing and a physical emotion. And it had fire. I mean, what more could you want in a public art piece, right? I mean, I don't advocate that we all go out, start fire blowing and stuff, but so I wanted to show that just as a kind of how you can kind of animate spaces in really interesting ways. And then I just popped this quote up here because I think sometimes there's a misconception that if we're making digital work that doesn't necessarily have a narrative, that we sometimes forget that we are storytellers. And what we do is we tell stories. So whether that, the mediums aside, whether it be film, whether it be projection, whether it be VR, we're telling stories, and storytelling is the oldest thing that connects us as humans. Like if you tell a story, people will come with you. And I just love this quote from Jim and Neil Smith, who is the director of International Storytelling Centre, go figure. But I just think that sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that we are storytellers, really. And then I'm just going to jump to this one. So again, this is the lighthouse that I'm using as an example. But actually, what I wanted to do is just show you this little graphic. So for me, so I work on the execution. So what is it? So when I'm writing any kind of bid for public money, so we just got just short £60,000 for this. So we got 48.5 from the Arts Council and 12,000 from other public sources, from smaller organisations for like Barnsley, Wakefield Council, Flux in Rotherham, and Cass in Doncaster. And so often if we're doing public work, you have to pitch something. So you can't. Well, you can go in and just say, I've got an idea, give me some money. Didn't work for me, that approach. So you have to kind of have something, you have to have a hook, you have to tell a story to your funders as well as your audience. So for me, I always work on what's the execution of it, what's the end idea. And that's the story I tell. So that's the story I pitch, and that gets us the money. And then working backwards, then I need to build a team because nobody's in Ireland. I'm not a coder. I can't program this. So I need somebody to do that. So I then build my team. Then I go, okay, well, that's my team in place. I need to get the money. Now I know what everybody costs. So then I go down to the finance section, which is usually Arts Council or public money. And then I go down back to the idea because I've got to write all this down. So it goes idea, execution, building a team, into finance, back to my idea. And it's just that circular motion. Like, so if I was really clever, what I would say is a circular narrative, like in film, that I use for my public artwork, is that this system, although super simple, and each one breaks down into different layers. Building a team is not just a case of, we'll build a team, it takes 10 minutes, and you have to, do all the legwork to get that team and so on. And finances, as we all know, is the worst bit of any project. And I'm dyslexic, so finance stuff just blows my mind. So part of my building a team is having a creative producer to do the finance and all that kind of stuff. But I use this model for everything I do, whether it be a film, whether it be a projection map, whether it be a light installation. And then moving on, so we are still telling a story. So for me, it's really about we're using a visual language to tell our story. So that is our narrative, that visual language. So we may tell a story through camera angles, or it might be transform the public spaces into temporary immersive experience, or through the use of digital technology. So, or we might even just mix all of that stuff up. So we might mix genres, bring film in, bring interactive triggers and projection mapping and all that stuff, VR, and then we tell our, and the story we think we're telling might not be the story we're actually telling. So, I often kind of think I have a really clear narrative of what I'm saying, and then I, you get the audience feedback, and you go, I had no idea that's what he was reading as. I once did when I was making dance, I once did a dance piece, and truth be told, in the safety of this group, I needed to fill about 5 minutes of time while the set transitioned. And the only thing I could think of was there was this really beautiful dancer, and every day she folded her clothes really meticulously before we started dancing. So I kind of said, okay, look, I think that's really beautiful and engaging. Let's put that in the piece, and we'll put a spotlight on it. And she's engaging because she's a beautiful performer, and we'll use that as a way to transition the set. And when we got all of our reviews, that was the bit that people loved. So I don't know if that's I don't know if it's a comment on my choreography at the time or that performer's exquisite beauty, but it was the bit that was filling time, was the bit that really resonated with people on an emotional level. So sometimes the story we think we're telling is not the story we're telling. And I think our duty and our job is to create spaces where people can be present, so where they can immerse themselves in the experience and can engage in a way that allows for interpretation. I'm not a big believer in spoon feeding our audiences, so I think our audiences are way more intelligent than we are. So for me, I never want to tell a story that the audience don't have to think about it, and don't come away from it in a way of going, well, I know exactly what that was about. I really like the fact that there's ambiguity, and I really like the fact that actually I think it's one thing, and based on my past, my presence, and my experience, it is one thing, and the person stood next to me, based on literally where they were 5 minutes ago, it's a completely different story. And I think that just makes really rich, visceral spaces and work. And then finally, I want to just share a 1 minute excerpt from a film that I made, which is a dance film. And what was really interesting about this for me, and again, this was where it was in between lockdowns 1 and 2, when we were allowed to go outside and things. And this really set me on a pathway to thinking in terms of my storytelling journey. So this piece, it kind of did the festival circuit and did that traditional route, but there was no narrative to it at all. I just really wanted to get out and work with this choreographer who I've known for a while, and this dancer, create a really beautiful film, and just make something. I just needed to make something after lockdown. You know, I needed to get away from my computer and just make something. And what was really interesting for me is the story that kept coming back to us about what this piece was about. So, and you know, when you put things in festivals, you have to write a synopsis, you have to write a treatment, you have to tell the audience what to expect. So I just made something up when I put it in audiences. It wasn't about this at all. It was, so I'm not going to tell you what I put. I'm just going to put it there for a minute, and I'll let you make your mind up. And I'd be really interested at some point to have a conversation around what you think it is. So let me press this, and it should be playing. If not, the link is down at the bottom. So I'll stop sharing my screen. How did I?
It's at the top somewhere.
Well, it won't let me stop sharing it. Why won't it? Heather, can you kick me off screen sharing?
Yeah. There you go.
Fabulous. Thank you. Oops. Let me. That's still playing in the background. Can you hear that playing in the background? Let me.
Is that better? That. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still hearing it. But thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that was a really interesting examples of digital storytelling without narration. So I appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly on because I'm conscious of time. So I am going to introduce Bethany now. Bethany is an archaeologist and digital artist who received her Masters in Archaeology of Buildings with distinction from University of York in 2019. Her research in 3D reconstructive modelling of lost structures led her to found Experience Heritage, an endeavour that combines her heritage and digital media passions. Her work largely focuses on 3D modelling, XR and mobile applications to educate and make heritage more immersive and accessible for groups such as the National Trust and the National Paralympics Heritage Trust. Recently, Bethany was awarded Most Influential Digital Media and Research Businesswoman by Acquisition International magazine. She was also named in the Digital Enterprise Top 100 Index and included in the Yorkshire Business Insider 42 Under 42s for 2023. So for Bethany's talk, she will discuss how technology is connecting audiences to the past through immersive reconstructions and non-traditional storytelling. Over to you, Bethany.
Thank you, Heather. Let's see if I can get my screen to share. Screen, yes, that's what we want. Okay, I'm looking at Zoom at the moment. And there we go. Hopefully that will work. Ooh, maybe. Looking at a blank screen. Is that what you guys are seeing? Oh, I'm frozen now. Oh God.
Let's see if we can fix it. Right, try again, Bethany.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think my yeah, it froze. I might just have to present it on the screen.
I can easily share it at this end if that's easier.
Yeah. It was working fine until I was sharing the screen.
Yeah, I'm going to kick you off and then try again.
Okay.
Okay, try again. If that doesn't work, I'll share it this end.
Okay, let me try one more time. I'm gonna try doing this.
Okay.
Is that working at all?
It's not.
Oh.
Let me do it at this end, Bethany. You just tell me when you Oh no, it is actually. No, it's on now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's you now.
Okay. Is that still working? Sorry, it keeps going black and then yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's I can see your front page. It's
Okay.
not coming up with the presentation. Do you want me to share it at this end?
Yeah, would you mind? That would be
No,
great.
not at all. Not at all. Do you want to stop your share and I'll do it this end then? Okay, we're just about there. Just a second. Okay, one sec. Just could you do a wee dance for us, Wayne? While we're doing this, here we go. Okay, so we'll do that one. Share sound, up to max for video, share. There we go. Okay, can you see that? Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so as Heather mentioned, I am a digital archaeologist and a digital media creator. And I started the company that I'm running because I found that there was a gap between archaeologists who could create media and media creators who understood archaeology. And there's a really important tie between the two when you're creating visualizations based on archaeological research. You need a lot of that information to feed into the reconstruction, but you also get a lot of information out of the process of reconstructing. And that's a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about today. Could you go on to the next slide, please?
Yeah.
So, sorry, has it gone?
Wait a minute, it's just it's paused for some reason. What's going on with our just a sec. Oh, wait a minute. Just a second.
It wouldn't be a talk about technical stuff without technical stuff.
Do you know, it's funny, I was just talking about that the other day. Just give me 1 second. When I did TEDx York, at 45 minutes, we tried to get the tech working. Okay, can you see that now?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, am I on the right page?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
So I create digital assets to make heritage more accessible. Often when we go to these sites, there's like, it's a ruin or it's a city that's been, sorry, that's looking all blurry.
Sorry.
It's a city that's been all built over, so you can't see the historical aspects to it. Or it's something that's behind glass and is no longer accessible to be experienced physically. So when I create a 3D model of something that gives people immediate context, and that can be used in things like game spaces, augmented reality, virtual reality, or digital animations to tell stories about these lost pieces of history or inaccessible pieces of history that otherwise people wouldn't be able to understand without kind of being told the story, but not really being able to kind of visualize those. Could you go on to the next one, please? Hopefully. I'm going to breeze through these ones. I kind of skipped them in my final project, but so this is, you're standing in Nostell Priory, the top hall. You're just looking at the space, and a guest or a volunteer might say, well, this room was actually intended to look very differently than it does now. It would have had a marble floor. It would have had some classical elements. It would have had some pictures on the wall, but everyone's going to kind of picture that differently. And though our imaginations can fill in those gaps, it's not necessarily going to be an accurate representation in our minds of what actually was. So if you go on to the next page, if I hold up an iPad that shows you this image overlaying, then you instantly understand what I'm talking about when I say classical elements, when I talk about the paintings on the walls, and then, you know, how the marble floor really changes the space with all that reflection, things like that. So you get that sense without me even having to say anything. Can go on a couple of slides, actually, you can skip the next one. So now I'm going to talk about my work with Slingsby Castle, because this was a big project as far as understanding what can come out of the creation of these assets. So it was my master's dissertation project. So Slingsby Castle is a ruin of a Jacobean manor, which stands on the site of an earlier medieval castle that no longer, there's nothing left of it other than the moat that used to surround it. And this is all that remains of the Jacobean manor. But what is really exciting is there are archival evidence of what this building used to be like in the form of floor plans and elevation sketches. But there's also other sketches of floor plans that was for a building that was never built, but was an earlier design of the same building. And that earlier design was actually designed by the father of the man who built the actual building that was there. So if you recreate these two versions of Slingsby Castle, then you can start to examine the difference between the two men and their intentions for the space, which was really fascinating. But there was some challenges involved because with the unbuilt version, there was only 2 levels in the floor plan, and it was very likely that there would have been more floors. But without that information, we kind of just had to make an educated guess as to how tall the building was and how the outside would have looked, because it's just a floor plan. And then with the built one, we had elevation sketches, but 2 of them contradicted each other. One was probably an earlier plan, and then one was drawn after the building had probably started to fall into ruin. So it was unclear if either of them was even more accurate than the other. So there was a lot of research that had to be put into deciding elements to then make an actually complete model of the building, because since one of the differences was the roof line of the buildings and the staircase, they differed in the 2 sketches. So I could either not make a decision and just not put those elements in, but then you don't have an accurate representation of a building when you do that, if you don't have a staircase to get into it, or a roof line. So decisions had to be made, and they had to be made based on my best educated guess based on comparative examples and things like that. But it's really important about what aspects you do put in there, because that's going to influence the viewer's interpretation of this building and their experience of it. And then there's also decisions you have to think about, like the color of the stone, the pitch of the roof, the chimneys. They're not depicted in the drawings, but there's definitely going to be chimneys. And all of those elements will affect the experience that the viewer has as well. Including also elements like foliage in the background, people moving in the space, animals, dirt, smoke coming from the chimneys, all of the stuff that makes the building feel lived in and used. So those are all elements that you have to think about. But we'll go on to the next page, please. And I don't know if you have ability to play the video, but so these were the finished models. And once we had the models, then moving through the space was a huge part of telling that story as well, because you're going to have a different approach based on how the buildings were laid out. So this one, you had to go all the way around the building from the main road to get to the front door. And that tells you something about pageantry that was intended for the site. That was the unbuilt version. And as this is the back entrance. This would be a gatehouse in the back garden. Obviously not the main entrance that has this weird kind of curve as you go in. And then there's not really a door to go in. That's a grotto back there. And then compared to the built structure, coming from the main road, you go straight into the front. It's much more straightforward. You don't have that pageantry, so you get the sense that the son was a lot more straightforward, just kind of wanted a nice house. It wasn't about showing it off and all of that stuff. Sorry, let me just catch myself up with my notes. Yeah, so we can actually, yeah, I was going to show you, I created a VR experience, and I'll just describe it, but it would be much easier to show you, and that's kind of the whole point. But if you're in the VR experience, you're standing in that back garden looking at the grotto and the towers and the walls and things like that. And you get that experience of, even though it's a Jacobean building, you get a very clear sense that he was interested in the medieval castle and he was making his version of that castle. But then you also look back at the gatehouse that was quite off center. You might have noticed the kind of curve that you had to go through as you went through that gate. And I textured that very differently, because I had the interpretation that because otherwise this building was very symmetrical in every way, it was very symmetrical, but this one element was quite off-centered. And what that told me was that he was planning on reusing a building that was already there on the site, which was probably an earlier medieval structure. And so I made a very conscious choice to make that texture look quite different from the rest, so that it would tell that story to my audience. And also the curve in the walkway was very clear cut as well, because it just highlights how asymmetrical that was. But that's also like an accurate assessment of what I thought that would probably have looked like. Can you go on to the next page, please? And so not only doing the research and getting these models created was part of the process of this research project, but also then how do I present this to the local community who were very much interested in what this building would have been and the story that it would have told. So I created this digital animation that plays in church across the street where they can go and check it out. But there's not a lot of text. It's just about like telling them what they're looking at basically. But really the point of it is to show them the impact that these buildings would have had on the landscape, what these approaches would have been like and how differently they would have been between the two different structures. And then there were the 360 images that I rendered out from different points within the different buildings to give you an idea of the perspective and the size of the building and how it would have been to be kind of standing within that space. And finally, I'm hoping to eventually make an AR experience so you can stand outside of the ruin and project, well, not project, but use AR to see the reconstruction laid over the actual ruins, so you get better sense of how large that would have been in the landscape and how that would have affected the local area. And next page, please. So then moving on from this project, the next thing that I'm really interested in exploring is how we can take these reconstructions into a game space, a virtual reality interactive game space, kind of an open world space where you can explore maybe a large building or a neighborhood or a street that's reconstructed, but also is populated with game characters that you interact with. So depending on who you are in that space, if you're a servant or maybe a fishmonger or the lord of the manor, you're going to have access to different spaces. You're going to be interacted with very differently. You're going to have options depending on who you are and where you're allowed to go and what you're allowed to see. So your perspective is going to be very much affected by the societal rules around who you are. And just the act of moving through the space and getting that perspective on how far buildings are, how big they are, how filled the space is with people, and how that interaction affects you can tell you a lot about the reality of living in that lost space. Yep, so that's me. If you want to go to the last page, if you want to find me, I've got all the social media stuff up there. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bethany. That was really interesting. Really appreciate you sharing that stuff with us. Yeah, and I didn't realize you did the full reconstruction of the buildings as well, so it's quite fascinating to see that, so thank you. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly on so we have a chance to have a wee chat at the end. So Dominic, you're up next. Dominic Powlesland has been deeply committed to archaeology ever since he joined a local excavation in Colchester at the age of 11. By the age of 16, he was engaged on projects in Winchester and soon after here in York, or I'm not quite in York, but York-ish. After several years at the University of Manchester, he moved back to Yorkshire to undertake a small rescue excavation at West Heslington in the Vale of Pickering. From these small beginnings, Dominic has gone on to establish himself as one of the most influential archaeologists in Britain, I would say the world actually. As director of the Landscape Research Centre, he has run an extended programme of survey and excavation in the Vale of Pickering at West Heslington. This programme has revolutionised the understanding of prehistoric to early medieval period settlement patterns and is widely regarded as one of the most important landscape archaeological projects in Europe. For his talk, he will be presenting Putting the Horses Before the Cart, documenting an extraordinary Iron Age burial. Over to you, Dominic.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, first of all, I'm going to try and share my screen and hope that works. There we go. Right. I am a, can you all see that?
Yes.
Is that working? Right. I'm a field archaeologist and I've been primarily concerned with excavation and understanding landscapes on a large scale all my life. And every now and again, you run into something which is so completely weird that you feel actually it requires you to rethink how you do things. And unfortunately, I've been rethinking how I do things most of my life. But in this particular case, I was asked by an archaeological unit in Malton called MAP if I could go and have a look at some bones they had found on a site in Powlesland. This pile of bones here, you can see, is a pile of bones. Now, I looked at it and straight away, I can see my URL's not working. Just a second. Link.
If you start your slideshow, play from start.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Then you'll be all right.
I'm not really. Yeah, I'm funnily.
You've not done it yet. Click on that again. Click on slideshow.
The slideshow.
Yeah, and then top left. See left.
Play from start. There we go. Right, that's better. Okay. Sorry about that. So this particular thing is a pile of bones, and I was asked to look at them and what did I think? And I thought, my goodness, what was quite clearly obvious was this is a part of a horse. Could have been a cow, but it was a horse. And the key thing about this piece of bone here and these ribs, this is an upright animal buried in the ground. I knew from that moment onwards we were facing something really quite unusual. And I was asked how we should go about trying to record it. So one of the issues about being an excavator is that when we excavate an archaeological site, we destroy it. At the end of it, it's gone. And in terms of, we might write reports with lovely words in them and tell people what happened, but basically, you know, once we've dug the site, it's disappeared. And this is rather critical because if we have no site, then the process by which we extract the archaeology, and in this particular case, a piece of archaeology that is quite extraordinary, doesn't survive. We can tell a story about what we did in the ground, but actually I think it's more important that we try and engage people with the curiosity and the extraordinariness of the process. So in this particular thing, we've got two horses, or ponies in probably modern parlance, and they're pulling a chariot, apparently, or a cart with a rusty rim of a wheel here. So the cart itself has got wheel rims that are made of iron. And, you know, having two horses there that are both standing up is pretty well unique. And it made for a rather unusual challenge, because in order to record this, I felt we had to record every single stage of the post-excavation, the excavation, in 3 dimensions. And the product of the excavation might be less of a simple book than a dialogue through the excavation, which allows you to look at the evidence as it came out of the ground and question that evidence, but also ultimately, and we haven't got to that stage yet, lead to something which is much more visual, that actually draws on that evidence in the ground to show a reconstruction of what might have been there. So in some senses, there's a bit of a horse there's another horse next to it. By this stage, they're very interested in the burial. The burial is quite interesting. Well, it's very interesting. So this burial, this is part of the theoretical cart in here. The soil here was much firmer. So
Dominic, are you seeing the same screen as us? Have you got a picture with stage 1 at the bottom?
Oh no,
because your mouse is going around a shape that I can't see.
Right. I've got a 3D model of a burial.
Right, okay, so you may have not shared your desktop, you might have just shared your PowerPoint presentation.
Right, okay.
I was just wondering there, because I thought, well, maybe you're pointing out where the horse is in this image, but I'm not
going to
seeing.
stop share and go share screen. And go to a different screen. How about that?
If you share your desktop. Yeah, that works.
Right. Sorry, I've got a whole load of things on my desktop and it's just sharing them individually. Right, sorry about that.
No worries.
That's a bit bigger. So here we've got our 2 skeletons seen from above. They're in a very large grave pit. Here are the rims of the 2 wheels, and here's the burial. Now you'll notice this burial's got an awful lot of teeth in it and bits of bone that aren't human. So these are pig, and there's a lot of pig jaws, quite a lot of pig bones, and they represent a feast. So we've got evidence of a feast, and they're chucking all this debris into the grave. So in terms of the story, it's not simply a story of a burial. It's about a huge party that goes on during the process. And we haven't yet got to the weird thing about the horses. So, this is something that's very difficult to draw as a picture. You can draw an outline of these bones and things, but you see how they're scattered all the way around the burial here.
So we're seeing the Sketchfab small screen with the skeleton in it. Is that what you're seeing, Dominic?
Yeah, well, I'm seeing it full screen at this end.
Okay.
Okay. It's all a bit strange. I've only been doing digital things for a long time, but I'm getting old. So right, I'm now going to try and change to a different screen.
Okay.
Or I'll go back to my PowerPoint. Right, there we go. That'll be my PowerPoint, and I'll continue to both and start. Right, we've got that one, and then we've got this one. So there's our burial in a non-interactive version. The next one shows the cart. And this one we do have to look at interactively, because the really important thing here is that you've got a big hole in the ground that's 4 or 5 meters by 3 or 4 meters by 1 meter and a bit deep, with a cart and 2 horses. The horses are in there, but now I have to change my screen again. This is quite novel.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you just share your desktop, you should be able to just
How should I be doing
them.
Stop share my share screen. Now does it offer me the desktop?
Should do.
Um,
Sorry, guys, you're all having technical trouble tonight.
I know it's let's try that. Well, we'll share this one for now, and then we'll see where that goes to from there, because that should have the chariot in it. Have we got a moving cart in there?
You're moving it about, yes.
Yeah, right. The key thing here, the thing that is totally stunning, is this. So this horse is literally standing up. So how do you kill a horse? In antiquity, you poleaxe it, and it will then fall over. It's the most effective way of deleting them. And in this case, there's two. They're next to each other. You can see where the front forelegs are. Now, this was a very challenging piece of excavation, but it was done at a time when the ground was very dry, so they were able to do this. But it looks very much so there's no heads because they've been removed by plough damage. And it looks like they were actually out of the ground. And this pony here is not stood standing upright. It stood almost as if it's a prancing pony. And the challenge then is, how the hell did this happen? Because you can't walk two ponies in a cart into a hole in the ground that has no ramp and then kill them while they're standing up, while you backfill the hole. It just wouldn't work. So we assume, I have colleagues that might assume other things, that they were poleaxed, the bodies were positioned in a prancing position on the ground, on their sides. All the bones were moved into position, and then they waited for rigor mortis to set in. And then they picked up the horses and put them in the hole in the ground. This is an extraordinary thing to do. And when I say horses, they're really ponies. Their shoulder height is less than 2 meters, they're about 1.5 meters. And then the burial in the cart, here I combined multiple models together so you can see the burial, and the burial itself is sitting on a dark area here. Can you see that? And this dark area is a shield. So, and if normally during excavation you have to remove these things as you go along, and you can't go back and say, oh, what was that funny stain? Well, that funny stain is a shield that was about to appear. But if they hadn't been very careful, that stain would have been removed, and that was decayed leather. And then you've got the wheels back here. These were recorded in a different way after I'd completed most of my work in an emergency situation. So they're not as well recorded, but we have enough of the structure to be able to say what went on. So this is the story here is about how this person is buried and what is the intention, because once it's buried, we assume that the heads are actually stuck out of the mound. So you've got a mound over the top, and the snouts of the horses may well have been exposed. And given that this is something that they're just burying, this is an extraordinary level of detail to go to, but it has a lot of story with it. And the story is about the process of the burial and the big party or whatever that goes along with it, where they consume all this pork, which is very high status at the time. And then the creation of the burial, and then hiding it from the future. And I just want to have a quick look at something else that tells me how we did it. Sorry. Right, I'm going to go to this one here, I think. Right, so this is the method we use for creating these models. And of course it's not working because it doesn't want to. Right, just give me a second to go back through all of these. I'm sorry, this is going to not work very well. There we go. So this is after the body's been removed, the shield is covered for conservation. But this process is quite drawn out. It involved taking thousands of pictures. So this is the locations of the cameras. For one layer of this model. So they're basically set at 3 different elevations. And the idea is that you cover every single portion of the burial. And there's a 60% overlap in every direction from every frame. And from that, we can build this 3-dimensional model. And because we have all these georeferencing points, we can then combine different models together. And I'm talking to the Sketchfab people about being able to make that more dynamic, so you can actually run through the models on screen, because I think it's quite important with something like this. It's so unique that the end result is a load of bones, a shield, and a dead body. And the dead bodies no longer go on display in the museum. So your physical evidence of this is very limited. Whereas if we actually take the excavation into the computer, as it were, and we can articulate the excavation better, we, I think, provide a better service once we've destroyed whatever is there. I'm going to go back to here just for a moment, because I've been recently introduced to a new thing, which is our slide. Right, there we go. Share, right. And then I play from slide. So we go to there. So to do that, I used Leica cameras, which are very expensive. I spent weeks and weeks on that piece of work. I think it fully justified it, because this is an utterly unique find. And the better the quality of record, the longer that story can last. And then this morning, I spent 5 minutes with an Apple iPhone recording a pot. Now I will have to go and do that funny sharing thing again. There we go. Have you got that? This is really helpful. I've probably got the same problem that you had earlier. I've got this very clever stuff, which is no longer showing. Sod computers.
I know.
Well, I've been using them for years. They never bloody work.
No.
Right, I'm going to stop share. I'm going to share again. I'm going to try and share this with chap again. Actually, you can look this up on Sketchfab. It's if you look for this number HP2VA229AQ, it's the stunning number that is acquired when it was excavated. But this is a beaker pot from about 1800 BC, or 1850 BC maybe. And this was made, it's not the best record, but it's pretty bloody good. So if we were able to do this for all of our finds, we can articulate excavations in a completely different way. I'm personally, my interest is in trying to understand people and landscapes. My job is to change the past by learning new things that allow us to interpret it in different ways. Finds occasionally occur and they have to be dealt with, but I'm not, you know, a lot of archaeologists are determined in the material culture. This is not my gig, as it were, but being able to take something like this, which normally you wouldn't get to touch or handle, and turn it into something which you can get effectively close enough that you could, it's almost like handling it, I think is a real breakthrough. So I would like to articulate really that although we started digitally recording in 1984, we've used handheld computers in the field ever since then. It's now quite a long time ago. Not a lot of archaeologists took any notice, and now there's a lot of move to using iPads and things like this because it makes it quicker. My interest is not in making the job quicker, it's in making the job better. So the more that we can articulate material culture in a form that will actually go into people's rooms, as it were, and you can use these with VR, so you actually to deal with the entire 3D world. I think we're entering a new era, which is made possible by new modes of digital recording. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dominic. That was lovely. Thank you. And it's really interesting, it seems maybe on the surface that, all the things you guys are doing are really disparate, but actually, you're using LiDAR scanning, photogrammetry, Internet of Things, you're using augmented reality and virtual reality, and you're using all of these different tools and digital techniques to tell stories to people without having the narrative. So people can come to that, they can see those objects and come to their own conclusions or be able to interpret and understand, or they can go to a light show and feel immersed and amazed at the flames, at the atmosphere, or they can go to a stately home and suddenly that brings it back to life when you skin the ruined building with what it might have looked like before, or you can use it to interpret history and understand things that you would never have understood before by recreating them using 3D scans and assets to actually see how these things went into the ground in the first place. You know, so these are all amazing examples, and the diversity and disparateness of your talks actually demonstrates, you know, just how wide a range of digital storytelling and wide range of tools that exist out there that actually we can all use. And some of them, as you say, Dominic, your iPhone, you know, and you know, when you're in that sort of space, you know, being able to use things that is literally in the back pocket to capture, to tell the stories, to convey those stories is just amazing, really. So thank you very much for your talks. They're all really interesting and quite different, but that's half the fun of this festival, is bringing all these disparate things together, chucking them in a pot and seeing what happens. So thank you very much. Now we've got 15 minutes left for some questions. Robbie will be delighted. So let's see what questions we've got coming through in the audience. And Robbie, you never ever fail us. So Wayne, what impact does complexity have on the narrative, in your opinion? It's a nice, easy question to start with, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for me, we go complex in the build, so we don't have to go complex in the delivery. So sometimes the complexity is getting these things to talk to each other. So it has a sustainability in terms of it'll run for 6 hours. Really, so I try not to make my work complex to look at, but behind the veneer, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Adeline has come up with a question. Hi there. How do we get around the obstacle of TV networks and streaming agents such as Netflix being more wary of taking on stories without traditional film or TV narratives? I guess they're thinking of things like Bandersnatch. As TV network streamers mostly have a mainstream audience in mind. So that one sounds like it might be for you, Wayne.
Yeah, I struggle with that quite a lot, actually. I think there's a couple of ways you can kind of hook them in, really. So digital technology is a great hook for streaming platforms. Mm-hmm. So they're always trying to, you know, obviously they're always competing against each other. So if you have a USP in terms of, like Bandersnatch at the time, you know, its USP was that you could choose the story. Well, actually, in many ways, it was smoke and mirrors, because irrespective of the outcome, the story was the same. The ending was the same. So I think using digital technologies in new and interesting ways will potentially get you in the door to one of these streaming services. And then the challenge then is how do you incorporate their interface with the interactivity? Okay.
I think there's cost as well. I mean, I think was it 16 times more filming hours it took to do something like Bandersnatch, which is non-linear, than it would for a traditional film as well. So that probably doesn't cheer Netflix up much either, to be fair. Okay, cool, thank you. Have you used digital, sorry, how have you used digital tools to bring history to life? Well, you've already told us that, but are there any particular digital tools in terms of interpreting history that are your favorites? I'm thinking yours might be Sketchfab, but Dominic, but I could be wrong. But for you guys, what's your favorite digital tools to be using in archaeological kind of contexts?
Well, I spent a year looking at all the different methods of doing photogrammetry in Cambridge, and came up with a set of tools that I use for creating things, which I use something that's now called Metashape, which I would consider to be the best tool at the time. I've only just tried the iPhone thing today, and I'm pretty staggered by what it can do in a few moments. And Sketchfab is a superb showcase. And we have done things where we can annotate, we can jump from image to image to image. So you can actually, and you can add in 50 points, which you can list other information. So we've only really scratched the surface of using that. So it comes as it's quite an important piece of additional documentation, but we also have to be aware that the more complex our documentation, the more visual it is, we have to secure its future. So I'm concerned about making sure we have standards for archiving, and that we archive in novel places. So the Landscape Research Centre, which I'm the director of, we have an arrangement. So our data goes to Zenodo, which is part of the CERN archive. And of all the archives I know of in the world, it's the one that's most likely to absorb ridiculous amounts of data. and still be there in 50 years' time. But I am also thinking that the primary photographs should probably be archived on paper. So we print them at a small scale, we put them in books, we put the books in the dark, we store the books as books of images, and if somebody wants to reuse them in the future after all the hard drives were crashed, they re-photograph them. So we can take a 35mm slide type format, and we can archive that as a 35mm print with high resolution printing, and you can photograph it again in the future and reuse it. Because one of the things that I did, I reused some pictures from the 1970s to make a 3D model, and it worked perfectly well. They were taken with a Hasselblad. I had the negatives. I copied those, and I didn't actually need to have, the originally made pictures. And I'm very conscious that there is a need to archive our primary data. We don't necessarily have to archive all the intermediate data. So the primary, the result, and the interpretation. Because all this research that we are doing, if we're not careful, and we might just suddenly lose it all. It's very difficult, for instance, to get people to look after books now. Oh, I don't want books. Universities don't like books. No, we've got that digitally. Well, you've got it digitally until somebody turns the lights out on Wednesday, and suddenly everything goes dead. So it's probably the elephant in the very, very large room that people don't really want to talk about, because we press the button so many times. There are 5 terabytes of photographs of that horse burial, that chariot burial. That's a lot of data.
I was going to say, not even just that, it's people changing that data. So like the onset of AI, I noticed that Sketchfab are renaming themselves Fab, and they've got 2 tags that actually you can attach to your scans that say this is either included an AI generator or AI machine or hasn't, in order to try and protect the authenticity of what it is you're actually what you're actually archiving or saving.
So I think it's a big challenge that we all need to be aware of, because digital stuff is very fancy. I once stupidly said in the very early 1980s, I had to buy a 10 megabyte hard disk, which was £3,000. I could take out a bank loan. And I said to a colleague, I can't see a day when we'll run out of space. I'm sitting at a desk and I can see 60 terabytes of hard disks within my view. So then it's only going to get bigger. I don't know how many iPhones there are, or mobile phones that take pictures in the world, but quite a few. And most of those pictures will die at some point when somebody drops a phone in the toilet or whatever. If they haven't got off-site storage, they'll lose their pictures. And I think that domestic pictures are very important, because they tell domestic stories that are unspoken. So pictures of space and plenty of people on a holiday, there's a whole load of information in all those pictures that people take that is not necessarily intentionally recorded, but oh my goodness, you can get so much knowledge from it. So that is something we need to focus on and we need to worry about. But it's a bit like a camera is like a trowel, and now a bloody phone is like a trowel. So they're just another tool that gets to the point where we can extract the knowledge, which we then use to explain the story.
Okay, I've got a question for Bethany next. What effect does the accepted truth of the building have on the story you tell?
The accepted truth. Yeah, I think that's the key with reconstructions is I told my version of that story, but someone else doing it would be telling maybe a completely different story, because there was a lot of question marks. And because I'm telling that story as someone who calls himself an archaeologist, a lot of people are going to take that as gospel and not, do the research to understand how I got to that place. So I think there's a lot to consider when you're making those visualizations, and that kind of goes back to what Dominic was talking about tools as far as archaeology is concerned. We're kind of shoehorning our stuff into what already exists instead of creating things to tell our story specifically. And there's a lot of metadata that comes into the creation of these things, which is really important to the final story. And how did I come to these decisions? And let the viewer kind of decide, well, do I agree, or is that something that I want to argue with? But how do I present that? I put it on a website that no one's ever going to look at, but like, it's, you know, how do I present that as part of the story? Yeah, it's interesting.
Actually, and how you connect it all in as well, so it becomes part of this kind of sort of accepted truth, I suppose. It's sort of accepted theory at the time, I suppose, you know. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly on because we've got a few questions coming through. So Wayne, now Robbie's put, to what extent has given the audience the ability to shorten their experience hindered your ability to tell a cohesive story? But the first thing I'd say is, does it hinder it, actually? You know, that thing of having a show on for 6 hours and folk being able to dip in and out at any point, so you're not getting the kind of cycle. How does that affect the telling of the story?
Yeah, I mean, it always is going to affect the telling of the story, because if somebody comes in halfway through the cycle, you know, the visual narrative and language that we've created, you know, they'll get that version of the story. I mean, I think it's one of those things that you just you have to accept that it's part and parcel of presenting work at durational work over a festival period, or you know, it's not an issue when it's a scheduled event, so it starts at 7, for example, but it's really more of an issue around festivals where it's lots of things are on. So what I try, for me, I try and create something that has a visual language throughout the whole piece. So if you dip in, you know, 3 minutes in, you'll still get a sense that actually there's a visual story, and hopefully you'll stay and you'll watch it again. But yeah, it's something I'm very aware of, and I don't have a definitive answer on it. I think it's just something that we just have to factor into our presentation of the work we do.
It's kind of just how you got to design it in, haven't you? Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, thank you. And Olivia's got a question, and this probably does affect all of you, actually, certainly in terms of the NFT bit. Do you think Web 3.0 will affect your work in the future? So she's given examples around NFTs, smart contracts, blockchain, etc. And I'm just thinking from what you were saying already, Dominic, about your photographs on your hard drive, you know, if they're in, you know, if you're using a blockchain type sort of way of sharing that data, or if your scans are become NFTs or something like that, would that create a situation where, you know, it becomes safer, or do you not think that'll come into your field of work?
I suppose it really depends on why would you NFT it? If the NFT seems to be very much tied up with making money, as that's the way they're being presented at the moment. But ultimately, this is knowledge that you want to go out to the maximum number of people. There's a process of creation. Hopefully, one gets paid for that occasionally. But beyond that, what I do is generate knowledge and an interpretation very often. And interpretation might be bollocks, but you know, it's an interpretation based on the evidence that we have, and it ought to change. So one of the weakest points of a lot of academic research is that in the art science boundary. So archaeology, the practice of archaeology is an art. Process of archaeology is a science, and they're constantly interacting. Well, you know, and that means that they are open to reinterpretation all the time. So a lot of the modeling stuff we do is so that people that are far cleverer than I am, that have much better knowledge, can reinterpret what we've recorded. But I think that, you know, we are into new things. I have some nephews that all do blockchain programming, and they're very well paid. But I don't. The part of the whole blockchain thing is about sealing things up, and I'm not convinced that from an academic point of view whether I want to seal things. So the whole process of using these digital methods can speed up aspects of our recording, but the purpose of doing that is to give you more time touching the soil and talking to it in the ground. It's a process of interactivity with the archaeological site. And if they become restricted by the use of, you know, protection agents or so on and so forth. I think it's a great weakness. There are university archives all over the world that contain knowledge that is archived. You can't get to it necessarily. So a live archive is not preferred. So all of our archives are live. They're on a website. You click on something and it tells you everything we know about that building, what finds came from everything else, every single feature. So we've got 39,000 features on the web with all their records. And I have been, we've been asked by various institutions, yes, they'll love to take the archive. And then you say, but it still needs to work. It's all written in HTML. It's very, very primitive. It will work as long as it's on a drive somewhere. But the minute it goes interactive, oh, we can't do that. No, because that's got risk attached to it. So we have to get away from the fact that our data it carries a risk. Computer systems have a risk of being hacked and things being stolen or destroyed. Well, if somebody destroys steals the context records from West Heslerton, I'll be very impressed, because they will be able to learn all sorts of things. But it's not an economically bounded resource. It's an intellectual resource, and I hope it always stays that way.
Okay, we're running out of time, so one more question for everybody. And please, you've only got like 2-line answers each, okay? So in a nutshell, what impact has technology had on your work? The biggest impact?
It's given me a headache.
Very good. What about you, Wayne?
It's given me an output to explore new avenues in terms of presenting things and using it to tell stories.
Bethany?
Yeah, it's given me a way to experience and to allow other people to experience something that's been lost to history.
Brilliant. Thank you. And with that, thank you to everyone, because we've run out of time now. So sorry about the technology issues, especially because it's a digital storytelling festival. It was going to happen in one of the sessions, and I'm really sorry, guys, that it was yours. So I'm sorry about that, but I think you still did a grand job, and your talks were really interesting, quite diverse, but really interesting in lots of different ways. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come up with the talks, to talk to our audience and to each other. So thank you very much for your time and your effort tonight. Thank you also to our audience for coming along, and especially Robbie for his many questions. You're going great guns. Thank you for your input, and to everyone else as well. Thank you to our sponsor Sign, Screen Industries Growth Network, for funding the event, without which we couldn't do it, or we'd be on beans on toast. And so I'm going to wrap up for the night. Hopefully you guys will be able to enjoy some more of the sessions. I know Bethany, you're going to, and Wayne actually, both are going to be doing some more talks in the next week. So thank you for that as well. And if you've missed it tonight, or you want to share with your friends, northerndigifest.co.uk, and everything will be on there. Okay, thank you very much, guys, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.